Hello YouTube, welcome. This is a short video in response to Mike Helmick, who's produced a couple of videos claiming that there was nothing blocking the sun during the eclipse that happened on Monday on the 21st of August. This video entitled Eclipse is August 21st, 2017, Shocking, Nothing Blocked the Sun. Now the first part of this video, Mike deals with a transit of the ISS across the sun and claims that that is a complete fake. And I'll do another video pointing out why I don't think that was faked at all. But I want to deal with this specific claim that there was nothing blocking the sun in this video. So I want to keep things fairly brief. I'll play a little bit of what Mike says and show a little bit of how he does his analysis.
What we're looking for today is maybe that Zedic Earth glass black disk passing in front of the sun, or maybe looking for the moon and its angles, or, something besides what we did find. Because, folks, what we found passing in front of the sun is absolutely nothing. Nothing's there. What you're looking at here is a photo from David Weiss Ditra. He sent this to me on Skype, and I'm going to show you many other photos. We spectrum analyzed these. Well, Chris Monk did. He used a different method. I used Photoshop. And some other people also tried, and we get the same results. There's nothing there blocking the sun. Okay, so what I did is I took David's sun, put it in Photoshop, reversed the light just to see where the light was going and to see what was blocking the light. The problem is there's nothing blocking the light. There's nothing in the way of the light of the sun. The sun is giving off light as normal, as it would be shaped that way as you're seeing it there. This is very, very odd. This is totally unexpected. And we were looking for something totally different during this eclipse.
So Mike has claimed that there is nothing blocking the light from the sun. His claim is that if the sun was this shape and there was nothing here blocking the light from the sun, then this is the image that you would get. He makes he provides no evidence that that is true. He simply states that as an assertion. And I'll look in a moment at what analysis he's done, but essentially what he's done is he's fiddled with the level settings so that some dark pixels appear light. The light pixels in the original photograph still appear light, and the mid-range pixels appear dark. This is somewhat well, it creates a very artificial image. But it's always reflecting whatever you do on Photoshop in this kind of way does reflect what light was actually hitting the sensor. What you need to do is understand what's actually been done. Now my question to Mike is, how would it appear any different if a dark object blocked the light from the sun to if the sun had become, or the light emitting from the sun had become this shape? My view is that the two would be indistinguishable in this kind of photograph. They would look the same. And you provide no evidence that they would look any different. Anyway, let's have a look at how the analysis was actually done. So this is Mike's second video in which he explains how he did his analysis. He also explains why people who think they saw a UFO didn't see a UFO, and he's quite right about that. But this is how he did the analysis. I'll play a little bit of it. I'm starting partway through because I wanted to just get to the part where he explains how he does the analysis.
Of the curves adjustment layer is the shadows or the dark areas. Over here is the light or the highlight areas. If I move this around, it'll change the sun or my highlight areas. If I move this around back here, it will change my dark or my background areas. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to reverse the position of the light, so I can try to get an idea of where all the light was headed, where it was traveling to, and this is what you get. Now,
okay, so let's look at what he's actually done here with the curves. He's taken the very darkest pixels and made them not as light as they could be, but pretty light. Up sort of 85% on, maybe even 90% on this scale, on this side. The slightly, as the original pixels were coming slightly lighter in color, they are being made even lighter still here. Anything above this line here means that the pixels have been made brighter or lighter than they were in the original. And anything below this line means that the pixels have been made darker than they were originally. So up to this point, so any pixels that were this kinds of shades, yeah, dark to sort of nearly dark, have been made a bit lighter or a lot lighter. Anything from there upwards has been made darker than it would originally. These mid-range pixels up to these midpoint here, quite a lot darker than they were originally, and then gradually a bit darker than they were originally, or quite a lot darker than they were originally, up to only a little bit darker than they were originally, and the very brightest pixels have been left at the same color as they, or the same brightness as they were in the original. So that's what he's actually done with the image, and it's important to understand that that's what he's done. Now, he makes a whole variety of claims about these images and others, about how you're seeing here light coming from the sun, but there's nothing in the way of the light from the sun preventing this area being the same color as this area. But he doesn't actually present any evidence that that's true. All he does is show that there's a small amount of light hitting the pixels here in this area, a very small amount of light, which is probably coming from scattering of in the atmosphere of light that's originated from this side of the sun. And again, I ask the question, how would a sun this shape emitting light with this area being totally dark, how would that differ in appearance on a photograph to a dark object moving across the face of the sun and blocking the light that was coming from the sun? And my view is that it wouldn't really differ at all from this image that we see here. We also need to bear in mind the limitations of the image. The image itself was taken with a filter on the camera, blocking out many of the photons that would have normally come into the camera, so that you can see the edge of the sun's disk, and it's not just brilliantly flared out by a massive number of photons coming. And the particular shutter speed and so on that was used to capture this image will have allowed a certain amount of light in order to capture this image. And that light would have been light coming directly from the sun, but also light being reflected from objects on the earth, light being reflected or scattered in the earth's atmosphere and coming through to the camera lens. That's what we're seeing here, and to assert that somehow by looking at it like this, you can prove that there was nothing there to block the light from the sun is absurd. And I want to show you why we know, or one reason that we know that that is absurd. So this is an image taken during the 2017 eclipse, or August 21st. It was taken by somebody called Alson Wong, and I have spoken or an email exchange with Alson about it, and I've put a link to his website, and I recommend that you go and have a look at some of the work that he does. The image here is a composite image, and I can already hear the screaming fake, fake, fake from the Flat Earth Brigade because it's a composite image. But bear with me because we're going to look at a single image shortly. But I wanted to show this. This is a composite of several images taken during the time of the eclipse. At totality, all taken at totality, but at different exposure levels and settings. And the objective is to capture the solar corona in some detail at correct exposure, but also to reveal the moon illuminated by reflected light from the Earth. Now, the amount of light that is reflected from the Earth onto the moon is very small, and then the amount of light reflected back to the Earth is also very small. And it takes a long exposure to get that kind of image. Remember, this is a new moon. It looks effectively dark to the naked eye. You can't actually see that it's there. It's simply a dark object. The camera is able to take a much longer exposure and reveal the detail. So by blocking out various the moon image there would have required a very overexposed corona, and by blocking out that overexposed corona and having a layer with the correctly exposed corona, and probably doing quite a lot of hard work on a photographic software program, you can generate an image like this. Now, I emailed Alson Wong and I asked him if he could guarantee that they were taken on all the images were taken on the 2017 eclipse, that this is not a picture of the moon that has been pasted into a picture of the solar corona, and he said that it was taken on 2017 August 21st, and the images are genuine. And he sent me a small file, not one of the very large files that he used for this, because he had to email it to me, which is a single exposure, long exposure of the totality, showing the solar corona overexposed and still showing the detail of the moon. So let's have a look at that image. So here is that image, and you can, sorry, this is not that image. Right, so here is that image, and you can see that it is greatly overexposed. The solar corona here is greatly overexposed, but you can make out some detail of the moon's surface behind that. And if we zoom in a little bit, you can see more of the detail of the moon. You can also see that the moon doesn't appear to be perfectly round in this particular image, and that's due to the overexposure of the corona and the flaring out of the light from the corona, just sort of eating into the edge of the moon on the sensor in the camera. I mean, in reality, the moon is perfectly round, but the image captured on the camera, because of the overexposure, has this slightly irregular shape to the edge of the moon. But the detail in the center of the moon is there and clear to see. And zooming in again, we can make out a number of features, all of which are exactly as we would normally observe of the moon. The mare are there and can be seen as the darker areas. The lighter areas correspond to what's normally there, the Tycho crater down here, with the rays coming from the Tycho crater, can also be seen. And so this is a single image, one exposure of the totality at the eclipse, showing that the object that is causing the eclipse is indeed the moon. And if we want to, we can play around with the curves and the levels of this this image, and do all the kinds of things that people normally do to show whether it's that's sort of something similar to what Mike did earlier, and we can see the change in the colors and so on. There's no sign of any box or area of this which has been pasted in. Obviously, something could have been cut out and then pasted in, but I'm assured by Alson Wong that that is not the case, that this is a genuine image, and to me it does appear to be so. I'm not an expert on image analysis, so I sent this to Mike. I don't think he's an expert either, to tell you the truth, but he has got this image and he's free to analyze it and play around with it as he wishes, and to explain why he might consider it to be a faked image. I don't think it is a faked image, and it shows clearly that it was the moon that was in front of the sun during that eclipse, and not nothing, as is claimed by Mike. Now, there are a number of other reasons why we do think that the moon is the thing that causes the eclipse. And I'll give a couple of examples of that for you, if I can find the right images. First of all, this is not from the 2017 eclipse. At least I don't think it is. It's simply an image that I got off Google. It's something called Bailey's beads, and this is an image taken just as totality is coming to an end. A lot of people get what they call a diamond ring picture, where you see quite a large area of light. And the eclipse gives the appearance of being like a diamond, brightly reflecting diamond ring. But Bailey's beads are something that was noticed at totality, or just as totality was ending, where you get these points of very bright light appearing, and they sometimes sort of move around a little bit on the edge here. And why does that fit with the moon being the object of the causing the eclipse? Well, something we know about the moon is that it is and it has an irregular surface. It has mountains and valleys and craters and so on. And so at the edge here, this is not a perfectly smooth round line, but if you could focus in on it closely enough, you would see that it was slightly jagged. And what happens is the sun's light shines through the valleys and gives these bead-like bright points of light. So this is one reason why we think, or another reason why we think that the moon is in fact the cause of the eclipse. And any explanation which claims that it's not the moon needs to also account for observations like this, like these Bailey's beads. Another reason we think the moon is responsible for eclipses is that the moon is not always the same angular size in the sky. Sometimes it's a bit bigger and sometimes it's a bit smaller. And the explanation for this is that the orbit of the moon is not a perfectly circular, it is elliptical, and it is also not perfectly centered on the Earth. As a result, the moon is sometimes further away from the Earth and due to perspective appears smaller, and it's sometimes closer to the Earth and again due to perspective it appears larger. It has a larger or smaller angular size depending upon its distance from the Earth. So at times when there will be an eclipse and the moon is further away from the Earth, the eclipse is what's called an annular eclipse. And at totality, or at the midpoint of the eclipse, we get this kind of image. The sun appears as a ring, with the moon placed in the center of that ring. And the eclipse starts exactly the same way as a total eclipse as did on the 21st of August. The moon slowly starts to take a bite out of the sun as it passes in between us and the sun, and it moves across the sun. But instead of it reaching the opposite side at the same time as this reaches this side, it doesn't reach the far side before this side of the moon has come across, and we end up with this annular eclipse picture. And there are many photographs out there of annular eclipses in progression showing how they occur, and the orbit of the moon is an absolutely perfect explanation for why we get annular eclipses, and indeed it predicts when an eclipse will be an annular eclipse and when it will be a total eclipse, because we know the distance that the moon is from the sun, from the Earth at the time the eclipse will take place. So, and we have Bailey's beads and we have annular eclipses, and finally we have the orbit of the moon itself, and the fact that by simply looking at the moon's orbit, looking at the alignment of the Earth, the moon and the sun during that orbit, we can predict exactly when an eclipse will occur. And not only that, we can predict exactly which parts of the Earth will be able to observe that eclipse. All of this fits perfectly with the moon being the object that passes between the observer on Earth and the sun and creating the effect that we observe. So that's some of the evidence that confirms, to my mind, that it certainly is the moon. It's a very, very good explanation for what we actually observe. If we use the right kind of photography and camera settings, we can actually see that it is the moon, as showed in Alson Wong's lovely photographs. We can explain the Bailey's beads effect. We can explain why the solar corona is visible at totality, because the sun is still there, it's still shining, it's still the fusion reactions are still going on, light is still being produced, the corona is still there, but the moon is in the way. Perfect explanation for that. Explains annular eclipses. and predicts annular eclipses, and the predictions always correspond perfectly with reality. So that's what we have to confirm that the moon does cause the eclipse. What do we have to confirm Mike Helmick's assertion that on 21st of August 2017, nothing was there to cause the eclipse? What do we have? We have nothing. We have some photographs that are completely in agreement with the moon causing the eclipse, and we have Mike Helmick and a few other people saying, I can't see anything there. These pictures don't look right to me, so there was nothing there. Now, which of those is more credible? Is it more credible that we have an explanation that explains all aspects of all eclipses and even a photograph showing the object that is causing the eclipse? Or is it more credible that a guy playing with Photoshop creates an effect and says, that doesn't look right to me, there was nothing there? I'll leave it up to you to decide which one you want to accept.